Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026.
Oh,
And can you believe we are already closing out the first month of the year? We're just a few days from February. Time is just flying.
it certainly is. And, they say time flies when you're learning.
That is the motto. And speaking of learning, we have a fascinating piece to dive into today. It's a really specific, focused look at the nature of spiritual work. We are looking at a devotional entry from Rhapsody of Realities by Pastor Chris Oyakhilome. This is the entry for today, January 28th, and it's titled, "It Requires the Supernatural."
And right off the bat, I think we need to talk about that title.
Please do, because honestly, when I see the word supernatural, my brain immediately goes to Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking blockbusters, Marvel movies, people flying, lightning bolts, the whole 9 yards.
That is the default setting for most of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
We hear supernatural and we think sci-fi or like fantasy. But the core insight of this piece, and really the main mission of our deep dive today, is to unpack how this source actually defines that word.
Okay.
The author starts by drawing a really sharp line in the sand between two concepts that we usually just mash together.
Which are?
The supernatural and the spectacular.
That's the hook for me, because he's arguing they are not synonyms.
Far from it. And honestly, until you separate those two, the source argues you're going to fundamentally misunderstand how spiritual power even functions. The argument here is that effective ministry, whether that's sharing the gospel or helping others or just living a life of faith, it isn't about human talent. It isn't about charisma.
And it's definitely not about putting on a flashy show.
Right. So no fireworks required.
Fireworks required.
Instead, it's about a specific type of power that's derived from the Spirit. And the kicker, the part that really raises the stakes, is that this isn't like an optional upgrade.
Like the pro version of an app or something?
Exactly. It is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Hence the title. It requires the supernatural.
Required, not suggested. Okay, so let's unpack this. If supernatural doesn't mean Doctor Strange, what does it mean here?
So the source anchors this entire discussion in Acts 1:8. But ye shall receive power. After that, the Holy Ghost has come upon you.
Okay.
And the definition the author gets from this is incredibly precise and actually quite grounding. He defines the supernatural simply as that which is powered by the Spirit.
Powered by the Spirit. That sounds almost, mechanical, like an energy source.
In a way, it is. It's functional. That's the whole point. The distinction he makes is that something can be spectacular. It can be loud, visually stunning, go viral.
Attention grabbing.
Totally. But that doesn't make it supernatural in this biblical sense. You can have a rock concert that's spectacular, lights, smoke machines, the works, but it might have zero spiritual power.
Right. And on the flip side, you could have something that looks incredibly mundane, like a quiet conversation over coffee.
Or a simple act of kindness.
That is deeply supernatural.
Precisely. If it is powered by the Spirit, it qualifies. And this is a massive relief, actually, because if I had to produce fireworks every time I wanted to share something spiritual.
I think we'd all be in big trouble. I'd be exhausted by noon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this leads us to the foundational argument of the piece, which is all about human ability. He brings in 2 Corinthians 3:5-6 to talk about sufficiency.
Yeah, let me just pull that up. It says, not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves,
The word sufficient.
but our sufficiency is of God.
Sufficiency. It's a word we don't really use much, in casual conversation, but here it carries so much weight. It basically means competence or ability.
So the author is stripping away the idea that our human capability, our intellect, our charm, our resume is enough to do spiritual work.
Yes. Which is a bit of a blow to the ego, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. We like to think our skills matter. We like to think, hey, I'm a good speaker. I can convince people.
And they matter as tools, sure, but not as the engine. The expert put it this way. The ministry is, by definition, the ministry of the Spirit.
Okay.
It was entrusted by the Spirit. So, logically, it is impossible to fulfill it without Him.
It's like trying to run some high-end software on a pocket calculator. It's not just that the calculator is slow. It fundamentally lacks the architecture to run the code.
That is a fantastic analogy. You can polish the calculator all you want, make it spectacular, put a gold case on it, but it won't run the software.
Right.
The author writes, without Him, you cannot fulfill it. But with Him, nothing is impossible. This shifts the whole burden. It takes the weight off your talent and puts it squarely on your connection to the Spirit.
And this idea of waiting for the upgrade or making sure you have the software installed, it brings us to a really interesting story point the source makes. It goes back to the early disciples.
You're talking about the tarrying.
The waiting game, yes.
Yep.
The source quotes Luke 24.49. So Jesus has given the disciples the mission, go into all the world, big job, urgent job. But then, almost in the same breath, he puts up a stop sign. Tarry ye in the city of Jerusalem until you be endued with power from on high.
Just stop and think about the tension there for a second.
Yeah.
Put yourself in their shoes. You have the most important message in history, a dying world. Every second counts.
Yeah.
And the instruction is, wait.
Do nothing.
Sit tight.
From a modern productivity standpoint, that's a disaster. It's so inefficient. My boss would be screaming at me, why aren't you out there? So why the pause?
It's a logic of equipment. The source argues that God wanted them to preach. That was always the goal. But he knew they couldn't do it effectively with just their human enthusiasm.
Or their memory of what Jesus said.
Exactly. They needed the power.
So if Peter or John had just run out the door 10 days early, before Acts chapter 2, what would have happened?
According to the logic of this source,
Yeah.
failure, or at least total ineffectiveness, they would have been unauthorized representatives.
Unpowered representatives.
That's better, yeah. Unpowered. They would have been running on human sufficiency, which we just established isn't enough.
But then Acts 2.1 to 4 happens, the power comes, and the source points out this drastic shift.
It's night and day. The text calls it a shift to dynamic evangelism.
Dynamic evangelism. I like that phrase. It sounds active.
It implies movement, impact, force. I mean, they went from hiding in a room, probably out of fear, to preaching with incredible boldness.
Right.
And then, and only then, do we start seeing the evidence, the miracles, the signs, and the wonders.
The order of operations there seems absolutely crucial.
It is everything. The Spirit comes, then the boldness, then the signs. We so often try to reverse engineer it.
How so?
We try to manufacture the signs to prove we have the Spirit, or we try to, hype ourselves up to be bold. But here, those things are just the exhaust fumes of the engine starting.
Natural outflow.
A natural outflow of the supernatural presence they had finally received.
Looking at this, I think a lot of us get stuck on that polish aspect. We take public speaking classes, we learn marketing, we try to make the message sticky.
We want to be influencers.
Right. But this source is suggesting that the stickiness of the message, the ability for people to actually believe it, doesn't come from the presentation.
No, it comes from the power. And this is where the source makes a claim that I found really provocative and maybe a bit challenging.
Okay.
The author asserts that the gospel message is humanly difficult to believe.
Yeah, I circled that phrase too. Humanly difficult to believe.
It's an admission you don't hear often from religious texts.
Not at all.
Usually it's the truth, it's obvious, how can you miss it? But he's admitting, looking at this with just a human brain, it doesn't compute.
I mean, think about it objectively. A man died, came back to life, went up to heaven, and this event somehow saves your soul.
Right.
And reconnects you to the Creator, to the natural, rational mind. That is a massive leap. It's absurd. The author argues that without that supernatural element, the message just bounces off.
And he doubles down on this. He says it was hard for people in Bible days to believe, but it is even harder for people today. That's a fascinating observation, isn't it? Why do you think he argues it's harder now?
Well, the source doesn't spell it out, but if I had to guess, we live in the age of information. We're professional skeptics.
Exactly. We live in a world of scientific materialism. If I can't measure it or weigh it or see it on a screen, it's not real.
Plus, think about the media landscape. We are inundated with deepfakes, scams, misinformation. Our default setting as modern people is doubt.
Pixar didn't happen.
Exactly. In the first century, the idea of spirits and gods was at least, common cultural currency. People believed the invisible world existed. Today, you're fighting a much steeper uphill battle.
So if the audience is tougher,
the argument needs to be stronger.
Correct. And the argument the source is advocating for isn't a better debate strategy. It's not better logic. It's proof. The author says, we need the proof of our message.
And that proof is the supernatural backing up the words.
Yes. It's not just stating God is real. It's a demonstration of that reality. It's moving the conversation from the theoretical, which anyone can debate, to the experiential. And that's undeniable.
That sounds intimidating, honestly. Go out and demonstrate undeniable proof. That feels like a lot of pressure.
It does.
Okay, I have to go perform a miracle now or nobody will listen to me.
It would be crushing pressure if it were up to you. But here is the comforting part the expert highlights. God knows this.
Right.
He isn't sitting up in heaven wondering why people are so skeptical. He's not out of touch.
He knows the cultural context.
He's fully aware. The Thor says our Heavenly Father is fully aware of this and has already made the necessary provisions.
So he isn't sending people out empty-handed.
Not into a skeptical, cynical world, no. He has provided the very thing that cuts through that cynicism, the supernatural power of the Spirit.
This leads to what I think is the biggest psychological pivot, or maybe theological pivot, in this entire text. It's about how we ask for this power. Because I think many listeners, myself included, have this mental image of begging God. You know the prayer. Please, God, just give me a little bit of power so I can do this for you. I promise I'll use it well.
Ah, yes. The bargaining phase of ministry.
Right. I'll be really good if you just give me the power. But the source flips the script completely on this.
It really does. It addresses that specific prayer. Oh God, I want to preach the gospel with power. And the author basically says, stop. God already knows that.
Right.
In fact, the source argues that you are not the one trying to convince God to give you proof. God is the one telling you that you need it.
That is a total reversal of the power dynamic.
Think about it. If you're begging, you're operating from a mindset of lack. You're viewing God as like a hoarder of power who's reluctant to share it.
And you have to pry it out of his hands.
The source says, no. He's the one offering it. He's the one stirring that desire in your heart in the first place.
So the fact that I even want to be effective, that desire didn't start with me.
No. That desire is God signaling that the provision is already there. It's like being thirsty standing next to a river. You don't need to beg the river to be wet.
You don't need to convince the water to hydrate you.
You just need to drink.
I love that. So if we stop begging, what is the new action? If I'm not pleading, what am I doing? The source gives some pretty specific instructions here.
The instruction is to pay attention.
Pay attention. That's much quieter than I expected. I expected shout louder or something.
It is quiet, but it's profound. Instead of generating energy through pleading, you shift into a mode of reception, of listening. The text says, pay attention as he guides you in the steps to take.
And this circles us right back to the spectacular versus supernatural theme we started with.
Yes, it does.
Because when we hear guidance, we expect the booming voice from the clouds. We want the burning bush.
We want the skywriting. We want the spectacular so we don't have to risk faith. But the source reminds us, his guidance is always supernatural, even when it may not appear outwardly spectacular.
Quiet power.
Exactly. It might just be a nudge, a sudden thought to call someone you haven't spoken to in years, a feeling of peace about taking a specific route home. That's the supernatural functioning in real time.
It connects us back to the identity of the believer. The source says, having received the Holy Spirit, you now have the power to be an effective witness, a proof producer.
Proof producer. That's a strong identity statement. I underline that one.
It is. It moves the believer from a position of trying to get something to a position of releasing something they already have.
It's an identity shift. You aren't trying to become a conduit. You're waking up to the fact that the conduit is already installed. You are the vessel.
So, practically speaking, the how-to here isn't a 10-step plan. It's simply trust. The source says, trust his grace at work in your life. Trust his word. When he speaks to you, receive it.
It sounds so simple, but let's be honest, that actually requires a lot of surrender.
It does.
It means trusting that the quiet thought in your head might actually be the creator of the universe guiding you. It requires you to step out on things that aren't spectacular.
And that's why that opening definition was so important. If you think supernatural only equals lightning bolts, you'll ignore the quiet nudge. You'll think, oh, that's just a random thought.
But if you understand supernatural means spirit-powered, you realize that the quiet nudge is the lightning bolt, just in a different form.
That redefines the daily grind, doesn't it? It's not just about the big crusade moments.
No, it's about the Tuesday afternoon meeting. It's about the interaction with the cashier.
Absolutely. The source paints a picture of a believer who is constantly yielding. The closing prayer encapsulates this beautifully. It says, I function always in the power of the Spirit.
Not sometimes. Always.
I'm a dispenser of divine power and solutions. That's another phrase from the prayer that jumped out at me. A dispenser of solutions.
I really like that framing. It makes it sound so practical.
It does.
It grounds the supernatural in utility. It's not just about spiritual goosebumps. It's about bringing solutions to a broken world, whether that's healing or a word of wisdom that solves a crisis or an idea that helps a community. It's all part of that proof.
So let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening. We have a source here telling us that to be effective, we can't rely on our own smarts. We need the Spirit.
Correct. Sufficiency is of God. That's the baseline.
We've learned that we don't need to beg for this power because God is the one insisting we have it.
Right. We need to stop convincing and start receiving. The begging mindset is actually a lack of faith in his willingness. That's a huge takeaway.
And finally, we've learned that this power doesn't always look like a movie special effect. It looks like effective witnessing, boldness, and following that internal guidance.
That's the summary. It's about moving from a performance mindset to a yielding mindset.
It takes the pressure off. It really does. It's not about me generating the voltage. It's about me staying plugged in.
Yielding is the key word. If you are yielding, the power flows. If you are striving, you just block the flow.
Before we wrap up, the source mentions lives being transformed and nations being impacted. It feels like such a massive scale, but it starts with that individual connection.
It has to. It starts with the individual believer recognizing who is inside them. I mean, imagine if every believer actually viewed themselves as a proof producer and a dispenser of solutions.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about church growth numbers. We're talking about societal impact. But it all hinges on that reliance on the supernatural. If we lose that, we lose the impact.
We just become another social club with a moral code.
And that's the danger the author is warning against, being a social club instead of a power station.
Exactly. Which brings us to the end of today's deep dive. We've explored the difference between the spectacular and the supernatural, the necessity of the Spirit, and the shift from begging to receiving.
It's a powerful reminder to check your source. Where are you drawing your energy from?
It certainly is. And for everyone listening, I hope this gives you a fresh perspective on what it means to be powered by the Spirit. You don't need to wait for a light show to know you're plugged in.
And here's a question I'd like to leave you with, something to mull over this week. The source was very clear that the supernatural is required to make the message believable. So ask yourself, in your own attempts to share your beliefs, have you been relying too much on logic and better arguments while neglecting the very proof that actually changes hearts?
That is a tough question, but a necessary one. Are we bringing a calculator to a job that requires a supercomputer?
That's the question.
Thank you for that insight. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.